There we
All
go.
right, Travis, you about ready to rock and roll, sir?
I'm following your lead, buddy. Thank you. I'm
Great.
ready.
Wait, before I get started, I just wanted to ask a quick question by a show of hands. People don't necessarily have to indicate this or not, but is there anyone who is on the Zoom today who has recently used psychedelic medicines? No.
Does mushroom tea count?
Well, it depends on what kind of mushrooms they are, I suppose.
Okay, I know. I don't think it was. I don't think it was that intense. It was with
Uh,
Phil, so I
I,
think that like Phil and I were drinking some mushroom water that he was on.
Uh,
I,
well,
I, I
all
take
of ours. Go ahead.
I take like a lot of buprenorphine for my pain, and
Okay.
I've got sort of like PRNs to take on top of the patch that are twice as
Okay.
strong.
Yeah, that's not a that's not a psychedelic. Peter?
Well, well, I do have a little bit of a party on it, kind of thing.
Hey man.
No, no, I have nothing to change the mood. No, no, no.
Peter?
Yeah, yeah, I've used psilocybin, microdose psilocybin at a 0.1 milligram.
Outstanding. Outstanding.
Yeah,
Well, certainly good
so
to know. Um, let's go ahead and get this thing started here, folks. Unfortunately, it came up with a little bar at the top that said this meeting was being recorded, and I had to find a way to navigate beyond that first. So either way, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the basics of psychedelic-assisted recovery. This is a presentation on psilocybin. I'd like to thank the Connecticut Addiction Recovery for having me today, but especially to Travis. Travis is a great human being. I don't know if you know him, but certainly give a shout out to him for making this possible. And on top of that, I'd like to thank each and every one of you who's chosen to join today. I know that sometimes this can be a controversial or an unusual subject, so I'm hoping to be able to present it in a way that everyone gets everything out of it. It's my sincere hope that you really appreciate this webinar and you take something home with it. So allow me to introduce myself. My name is Mark Guckel. I'm the founder of Solutions. I'm a CCAR recovery coach, professional, and facilitator. I'm a Being True to You certified spiritual integration coach. I've been trained at the University of Florida as a paralegal, and I'm a Cambo practitioner. For those of you that are a little bit curious, I won't say too much about it, but Cambo is the secretion off of the Philomedusa bicolor. It's non-narcotic, but it's one of the best purgatives known to man. And I trained a few years back to become a practitioner. If you want to connect with me, my website is up here. You can learn a little bit more about what I do. It's my email address, as well as my Instagram and my LinkedIn. Those are the two best ways to connect with me. So what I'll do is tell you a little bit about my psilocybin journey. I think everybody appreciates the story. But this is my mom, right? Like when I got clean about 40 months ago, my mom was my biggest supporter. And in turn, I lived close to her and we became very tight. It chokes me up today to think about it, right? I think, has anybody else taken care of somebody really close to them and watched them slowly pass, like slip away? It's something that's really, really, really hard. And I began to commit to taking walks in nature every day. So I would drive to state parks all around the area, just like trying to get out, be outdoors. I think there's a lot of healing that goes along with that. And as I was driving, I would always see this one huge pasture on the side of the road, and it was filled with look, a couple hundred cows, 20 donkeys. And I looked all over. I couldn't find a no trespassing sign. I figured I'd chance it. So like I hopped the fence and I ended up back in this huge pasture. And what I ended up finding back there was probably the most healing that you can imagine. And it wasn't through the mushrooms, it was through the animals. I developed this incredible relationships with the cows and with the donkeys I worked with for many months before the mushrooms began to grow. But when they did, you have to understand, like I was a babe in the woods here. I had never really explored this while a person in recovery who was able to stop using drugs with the help of psychedelic medicines. Those were ibogaine and ayahuasca. And this was entirely new to me. But again, so what I didn't know is I was in probably one of the most largest areas that you could possibly go in, and I found some of the rare ones in the world. Some of the ones that you see here are Psilocybin cubensis as well as Paniola cyanescens. So, the story just went on and on because two things, right? April in January, you're able to go and find these mushrooms. Just 2 days ago was my last time going and finding them. And if you don't think that along the way I didn't eat a mushroom or two, I'll raise my hand now and I'll say that I was guilty as charged. Some of the best experiences that I had in my life. If you don't know anything about mushrooms, just very quickly, there are two ways primarily that mushrooms that contain psilocybin grow. One set, they grow on decaying wood. On the other side, what they do is they grow cow dung. So the spores are spread on the grass that you see. The cows eat them. They go through the system and they're passed out in the manure. And then what you're waiting on is it needs heat and it needs rain. So after every rain, a few days later, you have, hundreds of mushrooms growing. And that's what I did for many months as part of my self-care routine. Now you're probably asking, like, what did this help with, right? Depression. So psilocybin, when you take it, it breaks down in to psilocin. And if you look at the chemical structures of serotonin and psilocin, they're very similar. So the way to look at this is it's a natural antidepressant. Processing grief after my mom's passing, right? Like, I think that grief is one of the most challenging emotions. Like, it's a process. It's not something that, we sort through overnight. It's something that takes time. And I found psilocybin to be exceptionally helpful in allowing me to go through some of the processes. I can also say that I never felt any more connected than I did when I took mushrooms with my mom. If you've ever had somebody pass, a high or macro dose of psychedelics, medicines is a great way to reconnect with them. Working through issues related to my childhood trauma. The reason that I used for many years was to medicate the emotional responses that came along with the way that I reacted to unprocessed childhood trauma. Like, it's hard for some people to understand, but these development wounds are what shape us for our entire life. Like, they make us who we are. And like, we have these knee-jerk reactions or mistaken belief systems. God, I've had some really cool opportunities, and I was a keynote speaker at one conference, and I felt like an imposter, if you can believe it. I didn't feel as though I felt as I should have been in the room because I looked at all the beautiful people that were out there and said, I'm not as talented. I'm not as educated. I haven't helped as many people, and those are because of our core wounds. And that was something that helped me to sort through. Inspiration and creativity. Gosh, I'll say that there's absolutely nothing better than a few grams of mushrooms for creativity. They certainly inspire you. I know that they've helped people to write music. They help a lot of people to draw. People draw some really wild things that they wouldn't have been able to with the inspiration that they get from the mushrooms. And then spirituality, just in a very quick sense. I would come home and I would dry these mushrooms, and most of the time I would save them. But every once in a while I would say, okay, well, I'm going to sit with some. And after one experience with some freshly dried Paniolus tropicalis mushrooms, which, by the way, are 3 times stronger and contain other chemicals than the Psilocybe cubensis, I've been a praying man for 2 years, that after every single night, I'm down on my hands and my knees praying to something that I experienced during a mushroom journey. And, I think that a lot of 12-step people go through that. They're trying to find that God of their understanding. And sometimes we realize it's a God of our misunderstanding, or like we don't know. And the psychedelic medicines are excellent for spirituality. Finally, I'll wrap it up here. If you look at my picture on the right-hand side, I recently spoke for a group that is advocating for the decriminalization of psilocybin in the state of Connecticut. Stuff like this is super important. If we have experience, it's a chance to get out there, to put our name out there, to be able to say, hey, I believe in this. And like, I don't live in Connecticut. This law will probably never affect me, but it'll affect people that I love, that I care about, and a lot of people that I don't know. And it will give them the opportunity to work with these medicines without fear of repercussion. And, people are sick, they're desperate, they're dying. And when they hear about this, they intuitively and immediately want to turn to it. So let me get into a couple definitions that may help you. A psychedelic is defined as being of a drug causing effects of the mind, such as feelings of deep understanding or unusually strong experiences of color, sound, taste, or touch. The etymology of the word psychedelic is from the Greek, meaning to mind manifest. Right, so the word psychedelic was coined in a correspondence between Dr. Humphrey Osmond and the famous writer Aldous Huxley. At first, Huxley said to make the world sublime, take a half gram of pantheromine, suggesting the word pantheromine being from the Greek word to show and the spirit. And Dr. Osmond countered with to fathom hell or soar angelic, to take a pinch of psychedelic, and that's what stuck. Some other words that you may hear that come up: an entheogen. This is a really big one. An entheogen is a chemical substance, typically of plant origin, that's used to connect you with the spirit. Actually, that's what the word actually means, is to bring you in communion with the spirit. Now, you'll also hear the terminology plant medicines or plant sacraments. These are fairly synonymous and often used to describe plants with psychoactive content that are mostly used in ceremony, in religious ceremonies, and may be administered by a practitioner. So this may be a little bit new for some people, perhaps not. Has anybody heard of this before? Anybody heard of this? Yeah. So in August of 2021, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, along with leaders in the behavioral health field, including people in recovery from substance use and other mental health conditions, developed a standard definition of recovery, as well as 10 guiding principles for recovery. So this is what they suggest: that recovery is a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. Now, CCAR goes on to develop on this, and they go on to suggest that people are in recovery when they say they are. I don't know if does anybody have an issue with this? Is everybody kind of in agreement on this? It's important, right? Because when people say they are, it's not when a program holds standards for what their recovery entails, not for what we might judge them to be, but when they say they are. And this may even include when they're using harmful substances, right? So how cool is that? Now, I'm going to stop here for a moment and develop on multiple pathways of recovery. Some of the pathways that are out there: you have AA, NA, CA, OA. You might have spiritually based groups like Recovery Dharma, Dharma Recovery, and Celebrate Recovery. You may have holistic ones such as sound healing and nature based. You may have culturally based groups like Wellbriety, and you may have medication assisted treatment. My friends Megan Perry and Paul Alvis suggest that there are infinite pathways to recovery. And like, I'm all with them, right? There's no right, there's no wrong, there's no good, there's no bad. A pathway is just a pathway. And if it works for someone, even if it doesn't make sense to us, it's our duty to encourage them and to support them, because it's their life, it's their. So this is the pathway of psychedelic-assisted recovery. PAR is a pathway of recovery that supports the mindful, intentional use of psychedelic medicines as a catalyst to help people remain abstinent from harmful substances, make major life changes, and to promote their overall well-being. So psychedelic-assisted recovery is representative not only of people who were using and were able to stop the help of psychedelic medicines, but all who are already in long-term recovery, who are working on specific issues, or just want to become better human beings. So, like, what's in a name, right? The concept behind this pathway was formulated through a number of conversations. Most of these took place right after COVID and before MPRC in Colorado Springs with Dr. Rick Davila. Like, we went back and forth, and we were just he was curious, like, what is this? And we're trying to explain it. And the idea first was that this pathway encompasses more than psychedelics. To just say, hey, look, this is just about the medicine, it's untrue, because it's just a catalyst. They're just catalysts, and this requires a life change, commitment, and the same support that any other group or any other pathway might use. It's not medication-assisted treatment. Like with that, think Suboxone and Methadone. In the only case that psychedelic medicines are anything like MAT is perhaps with ketamine. And the reason being is with ketamine, they normally ask you to take 6 treatments, and then after that, you have to go for regular boosters. But aside from that particular treatment modality, the majority of the people that use psychedelic medicines don't use it to replace anything. In fact, they use it to stop using things. The idea of psychedelic-assisted recovery extends past therapy or harm reduction. Right, you're going to have a lot of people say right now that therapy and medical model are the only way to do psychedelics. And the realistic truth behind that is there are multiple pathways to get to them. And as coaches, we need to support them all. As human beings, we need to know them all, right? And as far as harm reduction, we applaud harm reductionists for trying to help people, providing them guidance on how to safely use psychedelics. And we honor the fact that the roots of administering psychedelic medicines lies in harm reductions, but it's to say that this is all harm reduction, it's not. This is actually an activity that promotes recovery, which means that therapy and harm reduction is just a small part. So people who work with psychedelics utilize them as medicines, not drugs. This is huge. People that work with psychedelics are not drug users. They're people that use medicines. And by reframing that, by reflecting that, it makes them more comfortable, and it also allows us to be more supportive of them. This isn't to be confused with recreational use. People don't get high or say, wow, that was really cool. I'm glad that I took this. In many cases, this is where the inner work begins. Psychedelic medicines aren't reserved for just hippies, right? I think that everybody's heard the Grateful Dead or Fish and enjoys the music, but we all don't have long hair, a 72 Volkswagen camper, and live on the side of the road. There are a lot of professional people that are using psychedelic medicines, and what you're going to find over the next few years is they're going to become more and more mainstream. And now I know I'm going to say something a little bit controversial, but psychedelic medicines can be part of the recovery process, even for people who are otherwise addicts. So like there's going to be an overlapping of psychedelic assisted recovery with other pathways. And, this is a chance for people not to focus anymore on whether they're clean or whether they're sober, but on their recovery and on what's best for them. So hopefully we can find ways to encourage them. So the history of psychedelic assisted recovery. What I'd like to reflect here, people may believe that psychedelic medicines, like they're just here, they just started. And the truth behind that is they've been here for a long time. Indigenous populations have been using them for a wide array of conditions, even though some aren't well known or documented. One of the best that we know about is the Native American Church. They're an intertribal collection of traditions that were recognized in the United States in 1918, and their belief system revolves around the ceremonial use of peyote. They also take that a step further, saying how that their community is, and that the healing is found between the peyote and the community. So anecdotal reports indicate that mescaline, which is the active psycho ingredient in peyote, is fairly effective at helping people to overcome alcohol use disorder. Now, based on this, there's research that's being conducted to see if the peyote treatment shows scientific efficacy. And we're also trying to find ways of using it in a way that's respectful to these longstanding traditions, right? Like you have to understand, peyote only grows in certain areas of the world. Most of those are in the southwestern United States. So to be able to pick peyote, you have to get a permit. You have to have a certain amount of tribal blood. There's a lot of concern that pharmaceutical companies are going to try to steal this or take away from the sacred nature of the peyote, and rightfully so, and rightfully so. Interesting story for you, right? In 1909, Charles Towns and Dr. Alexander Lambert claimed their proprietary treatment cured alcoholism, addiction, and a wide number of other conditions. So what I'd like you to consider here, right, is that Charles Towns was the quintessential salesman, right? He was like one of the guys that you'd have on an infomercial, like trying to pitch stuff. He pioneered a treatment for alcohol use disorder, as well as a wide array of other conditions. And the way that he learned about this was from a roadside farmer in Ohio who told him it would help people to stop drinking. Now, Alexander Lambert was President Teddy Roosevelt's personal physician. He was a professor at Cornell University and was a member of the Committee of 100. It was with the American Association for the Advancement of Science on National Health, right? And so you have to understand the power that he had. And together, they ended up pioneering this idea that was based around giving people belladonna, henbane, prickly ash, and other substances, right? So when you think about belladonna, has anybody here read any of the Carlos Castaneda books? Like, I don't know if you've read the Teachings of Don Juan, but they speak about the Datura plant in there with the deadly nightshade, where people have these intense psychedelic experiences. And at this point in time, right, all they were considering these to be were purgatives. They would actually look at people's stool, and they would say by the color of their stool whether or not the toxin was out of their system, and they were able to stop drinking. But see, what they had never considered, what they didn't know, was that belladonna, henbane, and prickly ash were all dissociative psychedelics. They're in they're tropane alkaloids, and they produce hallucinations, euphoric states, disorientation, and may even cause cardiac issues. So for many years, they worked on this, and it was getting to be more and well known. This particular article that you're seeing here was out of the New York Times, and there was a gentleman. His name was Bill Wilson. He was from Vermont. He was a successful stockbroker. He was a military veteran. He was married by all rights. He should have been very happy. He should have been very successful, but he always struggled with his drinking. And like this guy, he really wanted to stop. He tried all sorts of different ways. A lot of them were spiritually based. It was with the information that we had then. But in fascination, and after his, he had already tried to stop drinking twice. On his third time, he saw this in the New York Times and figured he would try it. And you have to understand the money that was involved was a lot, right? It was a few $100s, so it was expensive. And on his third try around, he tried the belladonna treatment, and nothing happened, right? Like he came out, and within a few weeks he was drinking again. But like he believed in Charles Towns. He also had a lot of talking to people about the spiritual experiences. People would have to have a spiritual experience to be able to stop drinking, and like he was a really big believer in that. And so he went back to Towns Hospital. And, you know, on his fourth and fateful time, he had this incredible experience where he says, suddenly the room lit up with a great white light. I was caught into an ecstasy which there were no words to describe. It seemed to me in the mind's eye that I was on a mountain, and then not wind, but air of the spirit was blowing. And then it burst upon me that I was a free man. Slowly, the ecstasy subsided. I lay on the bed, but for now, in a time, I was in another world, consciousness all about me, and through me, there was a wonderful feeling of presence. And I thought to myself, so this is the God of the preachers. A great peace stole over me, and I thought, no matter how wrong things seem to be, they're still all right with God and his world. And that was the testimony of Bill Wilson, which was shared in a number of books and through anecdotal stories. And at first, people really believed this was a spiritual experience. And indeed it was, but it was one that was fueled by psychedelic medicines. And so that was the first place that we believe that psychedelics were used in the United States. Now, what you have to realize after this particular experience, it led Bill to form Alcoholics Anonymous with Dr. Bob Wilson. And we'll talk about how an experience works, and you'll understand that was how he made sense of his experience. That was how he brought this to life. So there's something to be said for psychedelic. Now, if anybody's curious, what you're looking at on the left is 900 hits of LSD. And in 1944, the people of Saskatchewan, Canada, elected Tommy Douglas. He was the first socialist provincial premier in Canada, right? So one of his promises was to reform the healthcare system. He made healthcare free. That was the first time that healthcare had been free anywhere in the world, and people jumped up and down. They said that he was a lunatic and he was crazy. And the funny thing is today the health system in Canada is all free because of Tommy Douglas. Right. The second thing that he decided to do was address important health conditions. Those included alcoholism, substance use, as well as other mental health conditions. And so he hired Dr. Humphrey Osmond, who was a psychiatrist from England, who had experience with psychedelic medicines, limited because LSD hadn't been around all that long and people didn't know about some of the other medicines. And then Abram Hoffer, he was a biochemist, a physician, and a psychiatrist. And they began to work at a Saskatchewan hospital in Weymouth with people that were struggling with their drinking, using LSD as a therapeutic catalyst. They also did something else that was kind of unusual and that they wouldn't allow people to do today, which was that they gave their staff cactus that had the mescaline in it so that they could better understand what having schizophrenia was like and could be more effective in treating them. And I'll kind of digress here. Bill heard doing it. He was like, no way, this is so against what were, the principles and tenets of AA. And then he realized, wow, their numbers are a lot higher than AA, and he was supportive. And I think that was around the time where he said, look, there are many ways to get to this. And it actually influenced him in 1957 to take LSD at the Veterans Administration Clinic. But I don't want to digress right from this. They ended up publishing a paper in 1953, and they've been working for about 8-9 years with it. So you have to understand, people haven't heard of this, and this was the first one of the first articles that psychedelic medicines were ever featured in, especially in relation to substance use. Now, don't know if you've heard of him, but Cary Grant, the actor from who starred in Gone in the Wind, was able to stop drinking with the help of guided LSD sessions and psychotherapy, right? He was very outspoken about this, although it sometimes linked him with the counterculture. But things got hard when this substance became criminalized. Like there were a lot of recovery people even that were kind of shunned and pushed under because of the stigma behind criminalization, the stigma behind drugs, drinking. During a 15-year period beginning in 1950, there was a tremendous studies done here in the United States, over 1,000 scientific papers, and over 40,000 people being treated for a wide array of conditions. So I'd like to share a little bit more about indigenous and traditional use psilocybin containing mushrooms with you. And the reason why this is especially important is it brings attention to the fact that mushrooms have been used for thousands of years in rituals, ceremonies, and for healing purposes. Kind of as mentioned with my own experience, they grow all over the world. They're fairly easy to find, and they can provide life-changing spiritual experiences that have made them a staple in the lives of people around the world for thousands of years. The U.S. Forest Services acknowledges the art discovered at Tassili, which is in Algeria, is the oldest known petroglyph uh, depicting the use of psychoactive mushrooms. They found this in the 1930s, and it shows what to be a mushroom shaman with mushrooms sprouting out of his body and hands. Now, this is circa 4700 BC. It's kind of hard to tell. I've heard reports going back as far as 7000 BC. This is one from the Selva Pacua rock shelter. It's in Spain. It was discovered in 1918, and it shows pictures of bulls and mushrooms, right? So as you can remember, there are several types of psychoactive mushrooms that grow out of cow dung, which lends this interpretation to have a lot more credence. Now we're going to get into some of the people from South America and southern Mexico who used psilocybin for generations, right? The Aztecs and the Mayans were the best known. The first time that their use was documented was in 1656, when the physician to the King of Spain wrote in a book to missionaries to stay clear because the mushrooms cause madness. And before the eyes of all kinds of things, they could see war and the. And so you have to understand that for these missionaries that were coming to discuss Christianity, this became seen as something that was pagan, like it was seen as crap. And a lot of these statues were hidden. These were found during the 1950s. And while mentioned on the slide, the Olmecs, the Zapotecs, and the Egyptians, so known to use psilocybin containing mushrooms. And finally, right, this is Maria Sabina. She was a curandera and poet with the Aztec tradition from Oaxaca, Mexico. This particular lineage blends a handful of traditions to include Christianity and has served mushrooms in a healing context called Ledas for centuries. Sabina died somewhat disgraced in 1985. Now, I'll give you a really interesting story here, right? When missionaries came to Mexico to try to teach them or conscribe them to believe in Christianity, people there had a difficult time reading the Bible. Not only could they not understand the translation, but in many cases they couldn't read at all, but they were big believers. Like they were, I totally believe in Christ. And to be able to get there, the people began to eat mushrooms. They began these actions with Christ. And then that was one of time where they said, well, the Bible really means very little. And that was one of the reasons why when they do these ceremonies, they have a very Christian flavor to it. So just a little interesting tidbit, but it's how the people, a lot of the indigenous in Mexico learned about the Bible was through mushrooms. So I'm going to give you a very quick primer on psilocybin. As mentioned, mushrooms that contain psilocybin have been used by people throughout the world for thousands of years, right? There are 11,000 named species of mushrooms throughout the world. 200 of them. 200 of them. Let me grab a drink here really quick. Thank you. 200 of them have contained psilocybin. Most are in the Psilocybin genus, but as I'll point out over the next couple slides, some of them also to other genera. In the late 1930s, Jean Bassett Johnson and Richard Evans Schultes were the first people to have witnessed, they were the first white people to have witnessed a ceremony in Mexico. And in 1957, a photojournal documenting G. Gordon Wasson's travels to Oaxaca, Mexico, were documented in Time magazine. That was the first time that anybody has documented actually going and sitting with mushrooms in Mexico. And, it was probably good-natured of him to want to publish this, but his actual agreement with the people there was that he never would say a word. And so you have to understand, like, it kind of came as a shock, especially when it brought a lot of people to the area. Bob Dylan, John Lennon, Mick Jagger, Keith Richards. And you have to understand that, like, when people heard about that, when people read about that, there was a lot of people going to Mexico to experiment with psilocybin. And it really detracted from the culture. It left Maria Sabina disgraced. In turn, there were a lot of reasons why G. Gordon Wasson may have went down there. Maybe it was for the spiritual side. Some said the CIA sent him down there. Other people say that it was pharmaceutical companies. However, what he did do was he took the psilocybin and he put some into the hands of Albert Hofmann. Albert Hofmann was the chemist who discovered LSD, and he analyzed the chemical structures and found two psychoactive compounds, psilocybin and the psilocin, which they were able to make a pill out of, right? So Sandoz began manufacturing what was called indicybin, which was isolated by Albert Hofmann. Now, something happened during the 60s, right? Things were very turbulent, and for a number of reasons, there was a lot of unpopular light, is the best way to put it. There was a lot of concern about psychedelic medicines. They weren't like heroin, they weren't like cocaine. Rather than like ruining people, they made people think. And so you had a lot of movement with the counterculture with students, and the government saw, like, basically anything that went against the status quo, against their beliefs, to be something that just didn't need to be there. So the Controlled Substances Act was passed in 1970. Very shortly after that, the United Nations got together and actually had a convention just on psychoactive substances, where they said that we need to regulate things. Nothing can be transferred anymore. There was no more any sort of commerce, and like LSD, which was legal up until then, no longer was. Psilocybin, same thing, right? So there was a big break on the research as well as the. So there's been a rapid shift in public opinion, which we're going to get into very quickly here, right? I think a lot of people wonder, like, what happens when somebody comes to sit with psilocybin. So I'm going to explain to you 3 parts of of people actually working with psilocybin. So people are typically prepared in a number of ways, right? This is one of the most important things you can do, is to get people ready. And this may include a medical and psychological screening. Some of the medical things that you're going to ask people about is there anything that might interfere with your participation? Like maybe somebody has a handicap, a disability, maybe someone has heart conditions. Psilocybin has been known to increase heart rate and blood pressure, so cardiac conditions may be something that precludes someone. More importantly, we ask people about their psychological conditions. Like there are some things that we Catholicism. I'm trying to get the right word. You know where I'm going with this. But some diagnoses like bipolar disorder and borderline personality disorder, some practitioners won't work with people who have those because they're concerned that it may exacerbate the condition. On the same note, I'd like to suggest that the people who are the sickest are actually the ones that we need to work with. And I think that we'll develop protocol over a period of time to help just about everybody. But it's important that practitioners are aware of the medical, of the psychological, of someone's trauma history. We'll also ask questions about what medications and natural supplements they're on. Some supplements may interfere. They may tend to, like, say, if someone is taking something like ephedra, it may interfere with the heart rate. It may naturally speed it up, and that's not something that we want. With medications, we're trying to get a lot of people are coming to psilocybin who have pre-existing psychological conditions, and oftentimes they're on medication. And what we have found is there are a number of SSRIs that just they don't mix well with psilocybin. So we have to ask people, right? Like, are you on any sort of medication at all? And if it's a certain medication, we either have to have them titrate off with the help of a professional, or just tell them this isn't for you. It's super important that we explore the risks and the benefits with everybody, right? We tell them, look, these are the good things that might happen. There are no promises made, but this is what might happen. And this is what your risk is for taking this. We obtain written consent. We ask people, is this okay for you to get treatment? Are you agreeing? Look, I understand that there's a amount of risk for me to participate, but these are the potential benefits. Then what I'd like to reflect is with all of these medicines, they don't work by you just taking them. People have to sit with the medicines with intention. And an intention setting process is something that people may work on for not just days, but for weeks or months ahead of time. And traditionally, it's not like, do this or do that. People will ask, will you help me with? Will you guide me with? Can you show me? And by asking a question, you may get an answer, or you may at least get a little bit of clarity on that. We also ask people that change their diet, to change their diet behavior in preparation. Like we'll suggest that people begin to take out the salt, some of the processed foods, because those can interfere with the psilocybin just as much like they do with other psychedelic medicines too, so it makes sense. You may also ask people to reframe the way they're eating, eat healthier, begin to be better to yourself in preparation for this session, because by doing that, you're going to be ready for afterward. During a session, right? I guess I should kind of stop for a second and say, it's important that you know that psilocybin is what's considered to be a classic psychedelic. That means that it affects the 5-HT2A or serotonin neurotransmitters. Now, this is the same thing that LSD hits. It's the same thing that mescaline hits. Like a lot of psychedelic, very much like serotonin, they're just a little bit different in their structure, which means that when they end up binding with the receptors, they don't act just like serotonin. In fact, they act remarkably different. So when psilocybin is ingested, it's converted into psilocin. And as I'd mentioned before, psilocin is very much like serotonin. And so when it binds with the receptors, that's when the people get the results. So beforehand, you'll usually ask a person not to be prepared by not eating, right? Like you don't want somebody to come in with a full stomach, but the person will eat the mushrooms with you. You may I think that maybe people with recreational experience may not completely understand this, but this isn't something when you're working with larger doses of psilocybin, this isn't something you do with your eyes open. This is something that you do with your eyes closed. Typically, people are blindfold and listen to music to be able to process the experience. It takes about 15 to 30 minutes to begin to affect the participant. It depends on what kind of food they have in their stomach, what their emotional state is. Like sometimes people that are nervous don't feel it right away. And, you know, within a short period of time, they're in their process. So the journey may last from 4 to 10 hours. This is dose dependent. It also depends on if the person takes more. Some people may take a second. Some people may take a third dose as part of the sitting. And psilocybin creates visual effects, produces emotional reactions, fosters altered thinking, and it changes perception. And now, like I kind of hinted at how important the preparation was, but this is where the work really comes in, right? So after a setting, people go through integration process. Integration is the process of examining what happened during the state of non-ordinary consciousness produced by psychedelic medicines, determining what was most meaningful, incorporating it into one's life over time, right? So integration, it isn't something that happens overnight. It can be a lifelong process where an experience means something different, like after a few weeks, or perhaps something else is revealed on this, right? This particular process can be guided by a clinician or therapist who may accompany it with psychotherapy. It can be done by a coach who has personal experience with the medicines, or it can be done on one's own. Now, great ways to reflect on what happened during the experience may include reviewing notes. Like people will often take notes during the experience. They may take a walk or meditate afterward and really think about it, right? One of the most important things here, though, is not so much what you learned during the experience, but how are you going to incorporate it into your life? Like what kind of positive lifestyle changes you're going to make? It may be something small. God, so I've sat with psilocybin before, and afterward, I've been able to do introspection, and been able to look back on the way I spoke to people. Maybe like an email that was short, or where I felt as though I was mean towards somebody. And psilocybin is really good for getting at things that are holding you back. And like because this is an amplifier, they'll bring them right up to the surface. And I can't tell you how many times that I've either been a kinder person, or changed behavior, or where I've went and it said, hey, you know what? I think I could have done better in this situation. This is what went on. And I've apologized to people. And you know what? It's not about them at all. Like it's about me. And that's the interesting thing with these mushrooms is they bring out the better part of you. And as coaches, as it's our job to encourage people and to let them know, look, there are three parts of a ceremony, and the beginning, the preparation, and the integration parts are the most important, right? So some of the counter indications that you may have that increase in blood pressure and heart rate that I mentioned, headache, nausea, dizziness, insomnia, fatigue, weakness, loss of coordination. As mentioned, right, for some people, this may exacerbate pre-existing psychological conditions. Like it may make people have to address what they're going through. And that can be very challenging for some people. Some medications, lithium, trazodone, Like they can both increase the risk for serotonin syndrome or other potential adverse effects. For those who don't know what serotonin syndrome is, it's something you'll hear about in relation to psychedelic medicines a lot. And that is that you get these basically are, it's like you're like doubling your serotonin or tripling your level of serotonin, and you want all that to be able to go out of the body. And when you're already on an antidepressant, they block the receptors, so it makes it harder to get out of the system, which means you get too much and you have these very strange side effects. Now, there's a tremendous amount of supportive research out there, like really short here. There are several reasons why public opinion is shifting in the recovery community about psychedelic medicines, most especially psilocybin. And one of these is because of the research that's been conducted and the research that's going to be conducted. So there are a handful of studies out there that have shown some groundbreaking results. And in a short form, these are three of the most impressive. Johns Hopkins University came to the conclusion that smoking is one of our greatest health risks. The CDC reports that only 1 in 9 people are able to stop smoking on their own. Countless amount of people are impacted by this, whether they die of something that's directly related to smoking or by one of the ancillary conditions that somehow smoking exacerbated, right? It's also legal. It's socially acceptable. I mean, gosh, who either hasn't smoked or who doesn't know a smoker, right? So they selected 15 participants. They gave them 2 doses of psilocybin and combined this with a guided imagery, essentially motivational interviewing. And at a 12-month follow-up, 67% or 10 still hadn't smoked. And at a long-term follow-up, 60% or 9 were not smoking. And this led to the first grant by the United States government in many years to do more research into psychedelics. And today, 3 schools, the University of Alabama, NYU, New York University, and Johns Hopkins, are conducting now a much larger study. And when you look at it from the outside, right, there are so many people that smoke that if this next study is successful, there's a pretty good chance that that they'll consider rescheduling psilocybin based on that. Right now, as far as the drinking study, New York University had 93 participants, gave people 2 psilocybin sessions with an option for a third combined with support and therapy. And by the way, on both on the drinking and on the smoking study, people were drinking or smoking like all the way up until the time that they got the first dose of psilocybin, right? In this particular study, 83% of the folks were able to reduce their drinking, and 48% stopped drinking entirely. And so, due to the impressive results, they're now doing a larger study with the same 3 universities that I mentioned, and they have 217 participants. And the final one, this will be the one to get really excited about, right? I don't know if anybody in here struggle with cocaine or major stimulant use. However, there's nothing out there that people can take like there to help you feel like you don't want the coke. There is no MAT, so there is no Suboxone, there is no methadone. There really even the treatment methodologies for this are very difficult. They're finding that middle-aged men have the hardest time stopping, and they don't necessarily understand why. So what the University of Alabama Birmingham did was something very revolutionary, which was to propose that psilocybin could be used to treat people primarily with crack addiction. People who were coming off of the streets of Birmingham, which is not necessarily the best place, but and also very difficult to recruit participants. people who are willing to stick and stay through the entire process. But they just concluded, they just finished with 40 participants, and the results will be released in the spring. This will be something for you to look out for. But from what I can understand, from what I've heard, and this is unconfirmed, but I've heard that the numbers on this are going to be just as encouraging as in the smoking and the drinking, meaning that we're going to have a very new, unique way of helping people to overcome cocaine use. There are three pathways to access, right? Like by now, everybody's probably saying, well, geez, gosh, how can I do this? How am I able to get to this? I've put a little bit of thought into this because I know we have international people here, and part of this is just for the US, but excuse me, other parts of it aren't. Excuse me, I got a little bit of gas. So this one is just in the US, right? It's called supported adult use. And what this allows for is it allows for people who would like to sit with psilocybin to go to a state licensed service center who has employed state licensed psilocybin facilitators who administer the psilocybin to them. It's done in a safe, secure, and a very caring environment. Now, as far as the training requirements, this is why this is, and I really always want to jump up and down about this because this is so cool. It allows anyone who is 18 years of age or older, who's lived in the state of, well, this one is particularly in Oregon, in the state of Oregon for 2 years, who has a high school diploma, to take a reasonable amount of training, at least 120 hours of classroom training, and then some didactic learning where they actually go and work with psilocybin. They take a test, and then they're able to become licensed by the state. And this is beautiful because it doesn't mean that someone has to have a degree. It doesn't mean that someone has to be a social worker or a therapist, although the people that have those same licensures can also get this. So it's a really beautiful idea. It's very much, when you think about it, it's a lot like recovery coaching because it allows people who perhaps are even going with their lived experience and take a very basic training and tests to become facilitators. Now, initially, this idea had started in Oregon with Measure 109. Now, we're also seeing something very similar to it in Colorado. Colorado has recent legislation, and they're trying to work out the kinks now. They're trying to build on Oregon's model because it can be a little bit better. And I think what you're going to find is this supported adult use is in more and more states. I would not doubt that when Massachusetts gets their legislation through, that you're going to see this in Massachusetts, right? So again, like when people come in, they get screened. Unfortunately, because it's involved with the state, there's about 20 forms, 18 forms to do, all stuff about consent, touching, release information, anything you can think of. People set intention, they get administered the psilocybin, and then afterward, they're able to do the integration that we spoke about. Now, religious use, right? This is a really big one. And what I'd like to reflect here is that it's something that's permissible throughout the world, right? Like one of the things that all of the great leaders always sought after is freedom of thought, freedom of the way that we speak, and freedom to be able to practice our beliefs as we see fit. So many have these in their founding documents, whether it's a constitution or some sort of Bill of Rights, and they give people the right to be able to work with religious practitioners who often serve these medicines in ceremony. So you see this in Canada, you see this in the UK, you see this in the United States. And here in the United States, it's primarily governed by the First Amendment of our Constitution, as well as the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which allows people to practice religion so long as government doesn't see it as being dangerous, and as long as they, you know, pretty much adhere by best practices. I'm stumbling for words here. I think it's time for another drink. But the reason why this is especially important, right, is that it's outside of the therapy model, it's outside of the supported adult use model, which means that the numbers will be low. This is something that most people will be able to find if they look. You can look for church, specifically, they call them churches, where people go there and sit in ceremony with the medicine. Like, this isn't about taking anything home with you. This is about going there and work with a practitioner and a group of people and be in a safe, caring setting. But the prices will be drastically lower, and it's something that's protected by the law. Um, uh, Certainly a big one for a lot of people, right? Self-guided use. And I think that this can be somewhat controversial to people because they're, like, how can a person in recovery say, wow, I'd really like to do some mushrooms today? What I'd like to remind you, right, is that with most psychedelics, they're not addictive, especially mushroom. People don't want to take them, at least at a large dose, day after day after day. Like, uh, God, who wants to look at themselves that much, right? And plus, they lose their potency fairly quickly. Like, there's a lot of tolerance that's involved. But to be able to sit with mushrooms, but by the way, if you're curious as to what the image is, that's a fork full of Paniolus cyanescens. They're 3 times stronger than the Psilocybe cubensis, and I promise you, like, they'll definitely make you think twice about things. So before you actually sit with anything alone, you want to determine the potency of the mushrooms, right? Like, you don't want to, like, put out a small cupful and realize, wow, I was just getting ready to eat enough there that I probably would have been staring at a wall for 20 hours. People also prepare beforehand, just like they would for anything else, right? There's fasting, there's a period of prayer, there's a period of intention setting where people are trying, like, why am I doing this? This isn't as simple as saying, well, I'm going to throw this into my mouth and hope for results. This is where you really think things out and even map out your journey. You want to make sure that your area is safe and you have all the necessary supplies, because there's a chance that you might have a sleep mask on. Excuse me, you might be listening to music. So you're going to want to have stuff to drink. You're going to want to have a flashlight. You want to have a purge bucket. One of the side effects of especially larger doses of psilocybin is having to throw up. There's some indigestible stuff that is in mushrooms, which means that they can make you a little bit uncomfortable. But almost all psychedelic medicines are purgatives, meaning that think about it this way: you get the chance to let go of something, to leave something, and when you throw up, it's a tangible way of looking and saying, "Wow, that's what I just got rid of." You may want to have a towel or wet wipes, a pen and paper to write down a little bit about your experience, an extra blanket, pillow, or clothes, sage or Palo Santo. I don't know if you've heard of those, but here's some Palo Santo. You can buy these on Amazon to burn. They smell beautiful, but are also very good for cleansing the area of any sort of negativity. You may have your music, your playlist. Then you're going to want to have something to break your fast with, right? Like, when you're done, you're going to want to have a banana, or something. You're going to probably be pretty hungry. And then at the end, of course, people reserve time to integrate, to really think about what happened. Like, what does it mean to me? And what kind of positive changes am I going to make in my life? Maybe what are the things that I'm going to let go of? Who am I going to forgive today? Right? I mean, I promise you, these medicines bring out a very beautiful part of us. If you're willing and you're open, the results sometimes are things that you wouldn't necessarily expect. I want to get into microdosing, right? Microdosing is the practice of using sub-threshold doses of psilocybin for overall wellness and mental health. Now, there's another part of it too, right? There's two levels of microdosing. Some use it sub-perceptually, meaning they never feel it. It's just like, it's just like taking like a vitamin. And then there are other folks who take a little bit of a higher dose and they do that for a different reason, like for creativity or to enhance their walk in nature or something like that. So some of the benefits include like, since this is a natural antidepressant, there reduce symptoms of depression and other mental health conditions, improve mood, creativity, greater mental clarity and focus. And as I mentioned, right, the 0.15 to 4 grams of microdose mushrooms, right, it's sub-perceptual usually. I think it was Peter who mentioned he had drank some mushroom tea. Like, I'm with you, right? Or the microdose. And then with a higher dose, you're able to feel it, but it's nothing that's profound. It's just something that gives you a little added boost. Now, there are some challenges involved with microdosing, right? Like when you first get them, it becomes difficult to determine what your sub-threshold dose is. So it may take you some experimenting to realize, like, hey, you have to take too much to realize what the right amount is. And sometimes if you do that, you may have a little bit of like a, hey, wow, and then you realize, wow, I think I took just like one too many capsules today. So there may be that uh-oh moment. The microdoses may cause anxiety. Now this is brand, what I'm getting to share with you is brand new. This study came out within the past 2 weeks, and what they're saying is because of the increased serotonin, that has an effect on the heart and also on the platelet counts, and it's especially thought to be something that a side effect with chronic use, meaning microdosing. So now there's concern that long-term microdosing may have increased risks for cardiac conditions. Like if you notice my little thing up here in the counter, or in the corner, this just came out about a week ago, right? And I'm not really trying to highlight the pharmaceutical company or what they're doing, but what I'd like you to think about, to reflect on, is that pharmaceutical companies are going to be trying to gain approval from the FDA to market microdoses. And chances are is it's not going to be mushrooms. It's going, because they have to standardize the dose. So it's going to be a chemical. And what, this is the important one, right? And this is where I'm going to give you the choice to make the decision for yourself, right? While there are local and state decriminalization measures in place that allow for the possession and possibly for the in-person transfer and exchange of mushrooms, these are still a controlled one substance, meaning that it's especially important to be careful if you are receiving these by U.S. mail, by any kind of mail, because it's a federal offense. The reason I bring that up, right, is that so often we're trying to move forward, that we fail to tell people what the risks are and what the considerations are. And we have to take, as coaches, we have to take a look at it like, hey, maybe it's okay for me to do this, but is it okay for me to suggest this to a recovery? Is there the potential of harm to them? Is there potential if I'm working for somebody? Like if I'm working for a company, for a treatment center, is there potential harm to the treatment center? Like there's multi-party vulnerability. Like we have a duty. To the recoveries, a fiduciary duty. Like we have to care for them in many cases. Like we're there. So we just have to be cautious and caring when we're doing this. And it's better to tell you because the choice is up to you. It's not for me to tell you. And one of the ways, just by the way, if people are ever doing this, one of the things that can help is to almost write your own little code of ethics. Like this is what's important, so people can read it. Like I can do this, but I can't do that. And this is why. And people don't need, we're just trying to keep people safe. I'm gonna hit on it. It looks like we've got Travis. What time? Can you see what time it is, Travis?
Yeah, it's 10 after 11. Got about 20
Oh,
minutes.
yeah. Okay, good. We're gonna really rock and roll here. So I'm gonna get into something really fun here. And this is one of the things, while a lot of people here may not know so much about psychedelics, everybody here, in my belief, probably knows about recovery. And so what I can do is show you a neat way of beginning to be supportive of psychedelic medicines and to be able to be speak in such a way that it's very reflective for the recoveries, for the people that we're trying to support, right? So some time back, there was this idea that the way that we were caring for people wasn't working, right? Like folks would come in and we would say, okay, it looks like you need to go to detox, and then you're going to go to rehab, and you're going to go to a halfway house, and you got to go to 12-step meetings. Like everything was essentially lined up for people. And we looked at this as a like what's right medically rather than as what's right for people's well-being. We treated people like objects, like we spoke about them in language that, well, we labeled them. You know, we didn't do a lot of things to help people. We didn't promote personal recovery. We promoted the party line. And because of the power that we had, rather than allowing the participant, the recovery, to make their own decisions, we told them what was right for them. So we came up with the idea of the recovery model. It started off in mental health, then it slowly transitioned into substance use. And what you'll find is that this is very much like the psychedelic space, the recovery model. And so there were a lot of changes we made. One of those was with language. As you can see, we started moving away from using things like addiction to substance use, and we weren't calling people recovering addicts, but people in recovery, right? Like there are words that we can use that bring people in. You know, so the words that we use, like just reflecting on this quote by William White about how words can empower or disempower us, right? It's important to understand the words that we use have a lot of power. They can bring people hope. They can help them to find a better way of living. They can leave them feeling like a unique individual that's responsible for their own healing, and not like they've been labeled or somehow are disempowered on their journey, right? And since the intersection between psychedelic medicines and recovery is rapidly growing, one way that we can all influence is using language that's respectful of individuals' healing paths and that denotes the mindful, intentional use of psychedelic medicines. So here you go, guys. Some of the ways we can be supportive of is, instead of saying trip, try using the words journey or the phrase sit with or work with the medicine. Like we're trying to move away from trip because it connotes the mindful intentional use. Like it's a term that we used in the past. Instead of calling people clients or consumers, let's empower their healing journey by referring to them as participants. Rather than calling them drugs or psychedelics. Let's expand on that and call them what they are: psychedelic or entheogenic medicines, sacraments or healing catalysts. Here's one: never call it a bad prep or a bad experience, but just let people know that it was challenging or revealing because it helped to amplify exactly what they needed to work on. And then finally, kind of goes along with my little picture up at the top. Just so you guys know, the reason that I took those was because I was eating a lot of mushrooms last night, and that night, not last night. But they taste terrible. Like they taste absolutely terrible, and it was just such a miracle that I was able to get them down. But what they've been saying for a while, like they have this, they call it a heroic dose, and they say that people have to eat 5 grams of mushrooms in the dark with their eyes closed for it to be considered a heroic dose. And what I'd like to tell you is that everyone who sits with any amount of psilocybin is a hero, you know. And again, just to add, like people aren't getting high. They are actually working with the medicine. And I think this is pretty cool because we're going to start to slowly wrap things up. I think we're going to have some time to talk here. Now, there's some rapidly shifting legalities throughout the world. Now, normally, what I do is I actually go over a piece that's on the legalities. Like I love psychedelic law. I actually do a lot of work in that space. And here, let me get this up here this way. And it's hard because especially when you have people that are coming in internationally, like it's hard to know all of the stuff that's going on. So what I'd like to reflect to you, this was published in the Journal of American Medicine last year. Why it's particularly important is because JAMA, they're like the doctors are the last people to come around. Yet at that point in time, they said that 25 states were considering 74 bills, and that some had been inactive, some were active, but they predicted the majority of states will legalize psychedelic medicines between 2033 and 2037. And so like this isn't something that's just happened on the US level, right? Australia is now allowing for providers. They've rescheduled MDMA and psilocybin, and now prescribers are able to write for it. The United States will be doing the same with MDMA in the fall of this year. And who knows? There's the potential that they could do psilocybin at the same time. But there's a very good possibility that it'll happen shortly afterward. When MDMA and psilocybin received FDA approval, or just MDMA for that matter, the UK Medicines and Healthcare's Product Regulatory Agency, or MHRA, will be forced to do so within 4 months. Like if I remember right, they'll either do it within 60 days or within 110 days. So like you're going to see some really sweeping changes. Now there's a huge movement with the veterans, right? People who have served our countries in the military and who have been adversely affected by their service in some way. I mean, gosh, those are the people who keep us safe, and they see people getting killed. They see people wounded. They may have been injured themselves. They may have had to do something that their conscience doesn't agree with, and that's something that they carry with them for the rest of their life. So the VA, United States Veterans Administration, is conducting research. And as these medicines become available, the veterans are beginning to they're going to get the first access. States like Maryland and Connecticut have set up specialized programs for veterans. Canada's Senate is looking at ways to make psilocybin available to veterans, right? Then you're going to see this on a state level. Oregon passed Measure 109, which decriminalizes mushrooms and sets up state licensed service centers. Colorado voters, they just voted for Proposition 122, which led to the enactment of the Natural Medicine Act. And that decriminalizes psilocybin, psilocin, DMT, or dimethyltryptamine, which is found in ayahuasca, mescaline, everything short of peyote because of its protected nature, and then ibogaine. And I'll just kind of hit on that really quick. For those of you who haven't heard of ibogaine, ibogaine is one alkaloid, or the active ingredient off of the iboga plant. Iboga, or the Tabernath iboga shrub, grows primarily in Central Africa. It's a national treasure to Gabon, Africa. And there are people, very much like I've mentioned about with the mushrooms, the Bwiti people have been using iboga for centuries as a tonic, as an aphrodisiac, as a rite of passage. And we found that just that one alkaloid is about 85% successful in helping people to stop use opiates. Also, with ibogaine and with iboga, there's either a very short or no detox at all. Like somehow these plants help people to get through it, right? So you have to understand, like there's a lot of stuff coming, and with that the 5 medicines that I mentioned, you're going to see that in other states. They've proposed it in California. I think it's proposed now in Massachusetts. Like you're going to see this probably in about 20 states. And then finally, there are states and areas are beginning to decriminalize psilocybin and other natural medicines. Congratulations to Ypsilanti, Michigan, for taking that bold step this last week. So, as I mentioned, right, this is normally a section, and I could probably go on with you for, gosh, for hours just talking about the law that's related, but I'm going to give you an assignment. All right. So here's your assignment, should you choose to accept it. I would like you, if you would, to research the psychedelic laws of your city, county, state, or even country. The way that you can do this is you can use your search engine and you just Google it, psychedelic laws, and or you may even want to make it more specific about the substance. What are the psychedelic laws with psilocybin, and then mention your area. And it may take you a little bit of looking, because what you'll find is there are attorneys that are higher up in the search engine, and they just want you to hire them. They really don't have anything to say about the law. But what you'll find is a wealth of information, not only about what you have going on, like currently or that's in place, but you may find that you have research. There are a lot of states that have research projects going on right now, and there are a lot of states that are also considering legislation. In addition to that, if you like this, and this is something that you want to further, a good place for you to go would be to, this is primarily US, although I think that there are some that they're around the world, but look for what's called decriminalize nature. All right. So if you look for decriminalize nature and then follow that afterward by wherever you live. So like in my thing, I would put down decriminalize nature, Florida, decriminalize nature, Tampa Bay. You know, those are things that I might be able to put down, and you'll find a group of people that are working to change the laws around psychedelic medicines. They usually have educational events. In some cases, that they'll even do stuff in person. And that's what I think, where I think that you'll be able to do your most learning and experience isn't over the internet, but when you have the face-to-face contact with people, especially when they're working with these medicines and they're willing to help you and teach you more. So I don't want people to take this the wrong way, but what I'd like you to do, what I'd like you to understand is that by knowing about the laws in your area, you'll understand some of the boundaries and limitations that you face. Right? Like as people that work in treatment, support, and advocacy, this can be especially important because legalities can be an important boundary that we must set when working with recoveries. Since many don't understand the law themselves, it's very important that you do, because you have responsibility to them. And there are no right or wrong answers here. You are allowed to do whatever you feel as though you are the best, although it's important that you must recognize you have a duty to recovery as well as to your employer if you have one. And if you'd like, you're welcome to email anything that you find or come up with. I'd be glad to help sort it through with you, or even have a discussion with you about it. And with that being said, folks, I have reached the end of the slideshow, and now I'm here. I'm all yours. I'm here to help you.
I have a question mark. I'm gonna go. Like I wanted to write the name of this. It was like on your third slide. Ethy, you were talking about depression, like grief, and I couldn't write it all down quick enough.
Well, which slide was that on?
I think it was like the third one or the second one.
Or you're looking for the word entheogen?
Yeah, and then it was like the quote where he said, "Opens minds."
I don't think that was on the quote on the. That was stuff. I know what I know what you were speaking about. Here. I think, let me read it to you. And if that's what you're looking for, oh God, for some reason, I can't control my mouse.
You're good. It's okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes they run loose.
Yeah. Well, no, it's operator error.
So
Yeah. So I think the one that you were talking about, there's a quote by Humphrey Osmond, which is what is it? To fathom hell or soar angelic, take a pinch of psychedelic. Is that what you're talking about?
no,
All right.
it was like like you had it on this because it was written on the slide. But if you want, I can email you and I can get it. That way I don't hold everybody
Okay.
up.
Yeah. Well, email me and I'll help you.
Yeah. I do have a real question though, that's not related to the slide thing. You talked about your experience and then you talked about the processes. And then like you said, one of the important things was asking people like, how do they plan on incorporating what they've learned into their life? And I think a
Right.
lot of people, whenever they don't know about psychedelics or they're just learning, they're like, well, how is that really helping people's recovery? Right? That's the question we get a lot. So what are some things you've heard, or because do you take people on their journey? Do you support people on their journey through this?
I've been asked to, but I'm really not in a spot where I do that. Typically, what I do as a coach is I'll help people with the preparation and with the integration. I'm not there when they sit with the medicine.
Interesting. Yeah.
Right.
So what are some of the things that you've heard from people that they incorporate in their life after doing this that
Well,
helps them in general?
Well, God, I think I mentioned a few of the things, right? Like there's a much higher level of personal accountability. Like these medicines will beat, like if you did something wrong, they'll beat you in the head. Like there's a reason why they've encouraged anybody that's going to run for political office should drink ayahuasca 3 times, because I promise you that at the end, yeah, because because it's like it's the ultimate truth teller, and it helps you to really break through your pre-existing conceptions and beliefs. Like you'll have experiences that will be completely the opposite of what you believe, almost as if it's trying to challenge you or to break you down in a way. And it's up for you to decide like how important those are. Geez, things that I've worked with, people with spirituality. I mean, how many people that I've spoken to who've been long-term 12-step members, but could never grasp the concept of a higher power. Um, and the whole higher power thing and the spirituality thing can be difficult for people just to get until they actually experience it. And at especially at high doses of psilocybin, people have these encounters and they can come back and say, wow, like I understand what my higher power is, or like I have a much better idea of what this is about. People may come in with anger, or like they may have resentment. God, how many people, find that to be hard to let go of,
Yeah.
and
It's like a deeper journey of self-awareness, like a deeper inner understanding of self-awareness. That's what it
well,
sounds like
you
you're
can
speaking of too.
you can do your step work. For anybody that's in the rooms, you can do step work in a ceremony. It becomes less about writing it and much more about experiencing it. Hey, can I ask one favor really quick before we keep going on? Could everybody wave really quick? Could I get a couple waves? All right. Cool. I just wanted to get a couple waves for my post because I'm super glad that you're here. Khalees, was that it?
Yeah, but I'll be in touch. Don't you
Right.
worry.
Right. Yeah. Okay. We need to talk anyway. David, I see
I
you've got
know.
your hand up.
Thanks, Mark. I found the event very informative. I'd like to speak my mind, though, and I'm going to, which is I proceeded to get sweatier and sweatier hands as the presentation went on. Normally, there's a comfort zone that I live in, and when I'm pushed out my comfort zone, that's great because I need to do that and I need to learn. But I think this pushed me to Pluto and beyond. There are many things that were discussed that I don't like. I've really got to go on the learning journey. I think there seems to be this conflation of several things that worry me. I understand wholeheartedly the medical need and legislation which creates the use of psychedelics in medicine, but then we seem to drift into this land of ceremony and self-administering and going to pick drugs on your own. It really worries me. And I think that even when things are decriminalized, what concerns me is that in a population, when there's, let's say, 100 people, there's always 5 people or 2 people that struggle. And those are the ones that I care about. So in the USA, when they've announced the floodgates of gambling, I'm really into the problems with gambling. It was part of my journey, and 98% of people don't have a problem with gambling. It's the 2 that do. So what do we do about those people? So when things are getting decriminalized, what do we do about the people where it's a problem? So it's brilliant that the floodgates can open, and it's brilliant that people can have a ceremony and do all this stuff. I really, really want to see MDMA and ketamine being used for medicine and for veterans and for all of that. I'll go on a march with you, Mark. But at the other end of the pendulum swing, it seems like the Wild West, and that makes my hands sweat. I hope you don't mind me saying that, but I'll speak my truth.
No, that's very important. And I think that a lot of people share some of the concerns that you do. And there is a number of people that primarily work in the medical model that jump up and down and say that the only way that we're going to be able to do this is in a therapeutic setting. But the unfortunate thing is that the religious use is a protected activity. It's happening a lot. It's actually one of the most rapid growing pathways. And I get a lot of emails from people where people are sick, they're desperate, they're dying. Many are trying to stop using drugs and want to go to something different. And their last concern is legalities. They just want a solution, no matter where you're able to find that. So one of the reasons why I brought up what I did is like with the religious use, it's legal. We can refer people there. With supported adult use, it's legal. We can send people there. And with hope, we're able to put the rules, the boundaries that are in place to keep people safe. And that's all I can say with that. I appreciate your reflection on some of my personal practice, but what I'd like to add to that is that I went to meetings for many years. I was a very loyal AA and NA member. I had an article featured in Grapevine magazine. I carried the message into countless rehabs, detoxes. And when I was desperate and dying, I realized that that wasn't the pathway for me, and that I had to look at things differently. And that was the only thing that saved my life, right? Like I inherited $2.6 million and was smoking $3,000 worth of crack every day, and I couldn't stop. So that was how I turned to psychedelics. And so my view is a little bit different. And just maybe to ease your concern a little bit, I haven't sat with mushrooms since October. I haven't found a need to. And what I'd like to reflect is that's really the end game behind this, is so that people get to the point where they say, you know what, I don't need anything. I'm perfect just the way that I am. I even heard somebody say, don't use the word recovery, because that infers that something is imperfect with us, and we're right just where we are. So I appreciate your insight. If you want to continue the dialogue with me, or you ever want to chat, or you want to hop on some of my further trainings, chances are is if you're not balding now, you will be by the end of the rest of my presentations, because they'll really make you think and challenge. And I love you. I love the way that you presented things, and I would be very open to a dialogue just because you're respectful, you're honest, and I appreciate that people that speak from their heart. You know, just think about me. I'm a crazy mushroom magician, so you know.
Bless you, brother. I appreciate your honesty. And like I said, I've learned a lot today. I think I've got more to learn.
We'll look forward to, there will be longer trainings, courses that are involved around this. I apologize to each and every person here, but this past year was very hard for me. I had to sort a lot of stuff out, and before I was able to carry an effective message again, I needed to work through my personal stuff. So expect this year to see a number of trainings from me. I think, I'm not sure who had their hand up next. Shell or Bianca? Who?
I can come in because it's pretty quick.
Yep.
The first question was when you were going through sort of the legislation and what's happening in different states and in Australia and the FDA approval stuff, you mentioned that there were 5 substances, and I'm really rapidly trying to write. So I think I only got 3 of them, which was the
Here, how about I read them to you? Psilocybin.
Yeah, got
and
that.
then you have psilocin, which is what the psilocybin breaks down to, and that's also another ingredient in a lot of mushrooms as well. Then DMT,
Got
or
that
it's
one.
dimethyltryptamine, then mescaline.
Got that one.
And that's going to be anything short of peyote. And the last one is ibogaine. It's IBOGAINE.
Okay, I got that one as well. So I only missed one. Okay, brilliant. Now the other question, I'm in long-term recovery, and I smashed out the meetings for quite, a couple of maybe just under 3 years in my early recovery. Came out to manage grief in another country, and I never got back in until this year. But I've remained abstinent, and in my, let's say, research journey, of active use of substances, I had lots of spiritual experiences, and I went on journeys from a very young age, right? And it's one of the things that I missed coming into recovery, because I never seemed to get that spiritual connection back in that way. So it's really interesting that you talk about what's on offer spiritually. And it is something that I've toyed with in my mind, like, because I've done DMT once. I've always wanted to do ayahuasca, and I really believe that DMT is something the whole world should take. Like, we should all have it once. It should be mandated, if you ask me. But the question is, how do I manage the conflicts of an abstinent recovery and hold that at the same time for myself or for anyone that I might coach that's having the same dilemma? Do you have any tips?
Well, it's a good question, right? So there are a lot of people out there that are working with psychedelic medicines right now that talk to me, but that won't tell you. So you have to realize, like, there are some incredibly big names out there that have been working with some psychedelics for many years, and they just don't have the well, some of them don't have the courage to tell you. Others are concerned about their professional reputation, because it moves away from the abstinence thing. It's kind of why I brought that up in one of the first slides, that look, there are people in abstinence-based recovery. So what the question that you're asking really is, it's something that you have to decide, right? And it may be something that's dependent on who you're speaking to. Like, there may be some people that, look, it's okay to disclose it to, and there are others that are not. I think more and more people will recognize you and celebrate you for being honest about it. But there are going to be other folks where, look, it's plain out confusing. Gosh, I pass Narcan. And if you think when I go and pass Narcan, like, I tell them that I eat mushrooms, I don't. Like, I'm straight down the whole, look, this is what this is about. Here's your Narcan. There's very little conversation. So I go with what's in your heart. Ask good questions. Feel out the recovery, and sometimes we have that intuitive sense where we can realize, wow, this is the appropriate time to disclose this, or this isn't a person. But your struggle isn't alone. I get messages all the time from people that, like, or they just want it to be, nobody else will listen to them, so they just want to tell me their story. They don't have the safety to be able to say, this is what happened and this is what it did for me, because there is this terrible judgment out there. And is this even possible for people in recovery to be using psychedelic medicines and to be okay? More importantly, can people still call them? Can a person go to AA and say, after they've drank ayahuasca, and say, I'm sober? Well, whether they
This
whether
is my dilemma. This is it. This is it for me. That's the
Right.
dilemma, So
Right.
yeah, it is something to think about, because at the end of the day, like, if I needed to take morphine because I'm having surgery, or there's lots of people have operations without taking the morphine because they believe that that's how to stay abstinent. Personally, I don't believe that. So I think it's one of those for me. It is a personal choice. If I'm taking it for a medicinal, then I think it's different to recreational use, personally.
Yeah, well, okay, so like that recreational use, when people take something before a concert or before a walk, I mean, that's one thing. But this is entirely different. I mean, like, I've sat for 14 hours and wept and been shown things about, like, the most terrible, horrible things about myself, so this isn't like an enjoyable, fun experience in most cases. This is a deep soul searching thing,
I think that I'm going to need to take your contact details and maybe go in a little bit more. So it's unfair. Like, I feel a bit unfair. I've taken up so much time. I thought it'd be a quick question, but thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, you're
If that's all right.
welcome. You're welcome. I would be glad to help people. That this is what I do, and I do care. I want to see people empowered with this information, even though sometimes it might go against even what we believe in. Because you're going to find, as this anecdotal evidence comes out, as these scientific reports come out, people they're desperate, like they want to do something different, to include people that are abstinent based.
Thank you.
I don't know where the one person went that had their hand up. I'm sorry I didn't get to them. Well, does anybody else have anything they'd like to share, or any questions that they'd like to ask? Okay. Well, with that, what do you think, Travis?
Seems like a job well done. Thank you, Mark. Round of applause for Mark for bringing this
Thanks,
important
Mark.
conversation.
Oh, thank
Appreciate you, man.
I hope you all got something out of this. And if there's some way I can help you, you have my contact information, and look forward to more longer in-depth trainings in the future.